Hey there, fellas. Okay, so here's what we're up to in this one. We've got this lovely motor. It was in a car for 10 years, and it was neglected, smokes a lot, and we want to take it apart, inspect it, and bore it out for a set of new pistons. And we want to try making a cold break-in stand. See what it's about, as well as how useful it is. I mean, it might prove to be useless. But we'll only find out in the process of setting everything up and cold breaking in the engine. So let's rebuild it, fit a new set of pistons. We can try doing a compression test before the break-in and then after it. We'll see how difficult this is to make and how useful it is. Okay, let's get to it. Do you enjoy sports cars, racing, and pretty girls? Well, then hit the link and subscribe to our new YouTube channel, Drift Taxi 54, where we take ladies for rides in 6 sports cars. We are currently filming new episodes in sunny Thailand. So make sure to keep up with this juicy content and subscribe to the channel by following the link in the description. Two days breaking in an engine cold. Why? Translation and voiceover by BMI Russian. Okay, so we've torn this engine apart. Just by looking at the block, you can tell what condition it was in. Here we have the cylinder head, and it looks like they were often behind on oil changes. The pistons... well, the rods, the inside of the pistons look horrendous. And if we take a look at the oil rings, there really aren't any. Yeah, these are severely worn. Hey, it is what it is. The caps, the rockers, as well as the connecting rod caps, everything is jet black. I can see some shavings in the oil pan, a lot of metal shavings, and some sort of washer. We also found this inside the pan, which used to be a tensioner. Not much of a surprise. That is a lot of residue. Like on every single part. Well, I mean, this is obviously an older motor. I think you get the point. Looks like we're going full oversize with this one. Anyway, let's clean this up. Send it to a shop to bore the cylinders out, buy some new pistons, rings, assemble that stand, put the engine on it, and break it in. Let's do this. Check this out, guys. The cylinders have been bored out, we're looking good. We've machined the deck a tiny bit. The cylinders were bored to the size of each individual piston. And now we're going to break it in cold. Time to assemble everything, set up the stand, mount the motor, and begin the break-in. Let's get to it. Okay, so look here. The crank and the pistons are all in place. We've fitted the oil pickup. We need the lubrication system to be fully assembled for this one. For the oil pan and front cover to be in place, because we're going to be filling the engine with oil. Now I should mention that the oil pump has to be rotating to generate pressure and to supply oil. And so we've thrown on a chain in order to get the sprocket to spin and set the oil pump into motion. We've modified an old tensioner, attached a spring, and everything works. Take a look. The rotational speed is not going to be too high, so this setup should do us well, I reckon. So let's finish assembly, get the engine onto the stand. Yeah, we do that and get it a spinning. Let's do this. Okay, guys, so we've gotten there. Here we have the block. We've cobbled together a machine, and we've attached a lot of stuff to the block. Oil filter, poured a bit of oil in. Now, we didn't have any big electric motors, so we'll be using this smaller one, which we've connected to a frequency converter to be able to adjust the revs. But then, you know what? We are running a large diameter pulley on the engine and a smaller one on the electric motor. So there's a reduction gear right there that cuts the speed in half. So this motor is going to spin at 1,360 RPM. That is an interesting motor we got there. It's just some random one that you'll find in pretty much any garage. We've got oil inside the engine, and I've hooked up a manometer to keep an eye on the pressure. This oil channel right here we have plugged. Since we don't have a cylinder head on this block, we plugged that to keep the oil at bay. This we've taped up to prevent the chain from spraying oil. Yeah, and that's about it. We've hooked everything up, we're looking good. Now let's try starting it. Switch it on. Yeah, hit it. Now the motor is a bit weak. Listen to it sing. Whistling. And here we go. It needed a bit of help to get things going, because this is obviously going to stick, with the components being new. Look at it go. Is it going full blast? It is. We forgot to check the reading on this, though. Got a bit distracted. How many bars? What are we looking at? We have an oil leak. Switch it off. And I'm gonna check the pressure. It's a good thing we're running that frequency converter. The pressure has dropped. Okay, switch it back on, and I'm gonna be paying attention this time. It needs a bit of help. Can you hold this? While I give it a hand. Excellent. Pressure begins to climb immediately. Look at that. Very nice. Okay, so that's a solid 1.5 bar. That might even be around 2. So the pressure is about 2 bar, that's good. And given that this is running at relatively low revs, that's like idle. Since there's no oil going into the cylinder head, the pressure is on the high side. But if the cylinder head, the cam and everything else were in place, that would mean more losses and reduced oil pressure. But I reckon this is more than enough to ensure that the bearings are in good health. We've also got proper lubrication for the drive mechanism, so we're gonna allow this to run for a while, and in the process, we should start to see, certainly, some of the cylinders are bound to start. You see, the piston rings are not yet broken in, obviously. We have oil splashing around in there because we do have pressure, and some of the cylinders are just bound to start spewing it, 100%. So we're gonna let it run and observe. So we've brought over a tachometer in order to measure the exact engine speed. We're going full blast, 50 Hertz. What's the reading? 666. Let me set it to this speed. Okay, it is going to have a hard time getting it to spin. How many Hertz? How many Hertz? 33.75. We can call it 34. 430. 430 revs. Very nice. Everything works. Stop. We'll let it rest. There's a massive leak next to the gauge. Why don't we just remove the hose altogether? We know there's pressure. Might as well remove it. So check this out. That's the oil dripping. You can hear it plopping, which is nice. And that's what I was talking about earlier. Look at how much oil is coating all of the pistons. It's actively making its way up here. That tells us the crank is splashing the oil around, and the oil rings can't yet remove all of it. The compression rings barely remove any oil at all, and so it's finding its way up. And this, my friends, is why a freshly assembled engine is gonna smoke. It's totally normal for the engine to smoke the first few kilometers. And there's the reason for it. Oil that makes it into the combustion chambers. And the problem with that should be fairly obvious. When you have oil in the hot combustion chambers, it's gonna burn and produce residue. And that is going to accumulate around the rings. And so now you have a situation where the rings are gradually... The point is, they get stuck, with the grooves getting clogged up. The rings cease to turn, and they're no longer doing their job effectively. Well, that'll only happen when you have a lot of oil going through, but you are gonna have buildup in that area, which is not ideal. At least I think so. So we want this to become mirrorish, or the rings to settle in properly, so that the oil doesn't find its way up here. After that, the engine is deemed fit for further assembly and startup. I'd want to find a way to hook up a water supply, or at least pour some in. For the sake of cooling, of course. This is a cast iron block, and this obviously isn't going to get hot. It'll take a while for the heat to transfer through the block, but a bit of water should keep it cool for longer. So let's cook something up, turn the thing back on, and continue the break-in. Now I am very curious to see how long this is going to take. To see the results of the break-in, and how many, minutes, hours, or days it's going to take or the oil to stop finding its way up. I expect it to take a couple of days, though it could just take one. There's really only one way to find out. So let's set up the cooling, spin this up, and wait. For you, it'll be quick. For us, it's going to be a couple of days. So here's where we're at with this. This was running for quite a while. About 2 days. Probably even a bit more than that. And at the end of the day, now we were switching it off. Wiping everything down. I mean wiping off the oil. We were able to sort the cooling. That was all good. Now obviously, we didn't have the head on. That was to get a clearer view. I mean, we don't have a professional stand with a ton of hardware at our disposal. That can sometimes even tell you how much fuel the engine is consuming. We have a simple setup here. Anyway, so if before a ton of oil was making it past the rings, now, well, a tiny amount is still finding its way up. But I mean, we were running it for maybe about half an hour, and we did see a bit of oil, but not too much. Meanwhile, the cylinder walls are becoming shiny like a mirror. Now, the point obviously wasn't to remove the hone, so that's still intact. Anyway, so if the oil is no longer making it past the rings, that tells us that everything is more or less broken in. That'll make for a serious increase in the engine's longevity. The reason being that nothing was getting hot, there was no coking, the cold break-in made for a nice mirror surface, without any evidence of wear. I mean, that would have been wild. So this did take a little while, but the quality is definitely there. And now I suggest we do the following. Install the cylinder head, adjust the valves, hit the starter motor and all of that, and do a compression test in order to work out exactly where the motor is currently at and how thorough of a job we've done. That'll also tell us overall how well we've done with the engine rebuild, as well as the break-in. The key thing here is for the compression to be the same across the board. So after assembly, we'll do a test, and that should tell us everything we want to know. Okay, time to get to work. Okay, we've assembled the motor, everything's looking good. We decided not to bolt down the valve cover, but the valves we did adjust. And now we get to the interesting part, which is to do a compression test. Time for the compression test. That was the whole point of this from the beginning. Okay, hit it. That's enough. We are doing very well. Almost 12. 11.8 maybe? I think we can round that up to 12. Can we not? Let's call it 11.8, whatever. Let's check number 3 now. Hit it. It's just that our screw-in type manometer is broken, so we're in for a bit of torture. Can't quite keep it at bay. Hit it. That'll do. Well, that's about the same. Maybe a tiny bit less. 3 or 2? This is 2. Let her rip. You see this? What? Hey, you were the one focusing the camera. And that's another 11.8. Looking good. And now number 1. Let's go. Yeah, we seem to have done very well indeed. The results are very good. And there you have it, guys. This didn't turn out half bad. I mean, granted, things might change when we start this, but there really wasn't much oil finding its way up. And we were wiping down and degreasing everything. Whatever oil was making it past the rings. I mean, there was some left on the cylinder walls, but it wasn't an enormous amount by any means. It's definitely not enough to boost the compression. But the results are solid. Readings were even. The deviation was at a minimum. Like, the results were actually close to perfect. This was pretty interesting. Using such a tiny motor, and it is quite compact. So this is the setup we were running. The motor, a belt, a frequency converter for adjusting the speed. I mean, you don't really even need it, with the reduction we already had. And we got it all to work. The compression in all of the cylinders is about 12 kilos, which is just fantastic. And the cold break-in procedure made it so that the oil that was making it past the rings wasn't coking up around the valves or the rings. And the way I see it, that'll make the engine last longer. Because a traditional break-in would have resulted in the burned oil clogging the grooves for the piston rings. That would have made the rings stick, increased the wear, and significantly reduced the engine's lifespan. So yeah, I would recommend doing this when rebuilding an engine. This is a fantastic solution. It's been around for a while. Can't imagine why people don't use it. This works tremendously well, and it's very easy to pull off. I think anybody can put something like this together, in any sort of garage. We saw the cylinder walls attain a sort of mirror shine. With the honing finish intact, everything was good. Less and less oil was making it past the rings, and the compression numbers were great. We wouldn't have seen that sort of result right away with overbore pistons. I'm confident this engine is going to run stably. Yeah, this one is a winner. Go ahead and try this out. This'll provide some extra longevity for your engine. And that's all I got for you. Watch us, subscribe, send in your suggestions, comment, give us a big thumbs up. All right, catch you later.